I want to, first of all, on behalf of Shelby Nealy and the defense team, I want to thank you, each and every one of you, for taking out the valuable time that is yours to be here for the past 2 weeks and to be attentive and to listen. And I know you're probably tired and you may not want to hear from me, but I'm confident that you'll listen to me for a little bit. I promise you I will not be up here for 3 hours. Now, Mr. Sarabia, in his closing argument at the very beginning and throughout, talked about fun facts. Let me be very clear. There are no fun facts in this case. Zero, none. They do not exist. Shelby Nealy, when he was about 18 years of age, shared a poem with his friend Rachel Rigby, who you heard from. The poem is in evidence, and I'm going to read it to you. And I apologize for some of the language, but it is what it is. Where the fuck are you, Dad? You're making me angry, you're making me sad. I just want you back so I can be happy, so I can be glad. I was your fucking little boy. I was your little lad. But no, not anymore. You're gone from this world, and you left me to fucking rot. Obviously, you didn't care about me a lot, because now I'm on the path of pain. The path alone must fucking trot, and this is all because of you, Father. Are you proud it ended this way? What the fuck were you thinking? What the fuck am I supposed to say? And why the fuck did you do it a day after my motherfucking birthday? Father, it's your love I crave. You said you were strong, you said you were brave, but motherfucker, I was the one kneeling before your grave. You said you were brave, you said you were strong, but goddammit, you were fucking wrong. Father, I would have helped you along. I should have fucking tried. But instead, you pulled the trigger and fucking died. Then everyone asked if I was okay. This trial, members of the jury, is about the most powerful human emotion, which is love. Shelby killed Jamie, Richard, Laura, and Nicholas, and it is the most horrific and inexcusable thing that he could do. And no family should ever have to suffer as his adult children who's been sitting here through this trial, or anyone else who loved the victims in this case. Why did it happen? I would propose to you that Shelby Nealy saw himself in a situation where he was going to lose custody of his children, he was going to lose his children, after having killed his wife, the mother of his children, Jamie. What led to Shelby Nealy killing her? He's pled guilty to manslaughter. You know that, it's stipulated to. It suggests, I would say respectfully, that the facts were not so simple. They're not as Mr. Sarabia suggests. Rather, the story that Shelby tells when he's arrested in Ohio is probably the closest to the truth. That Jamie was having a psychotic moment. She was threatening him with a knife. She was threatening to kill his daughter. And after having been beat up again and again and again, he defended his daughter, he defended himself. Did he take it too far? He may have. But that's what happened, members of the jury. And there is evidence that's been presented to you in this case that supports that. You've seen evidence and heard witnesses testify from Ohio, from law enforcement members to people that Shelby worked with, right? And you heard about the behavior of Jamie. It's not about trashing Jamie. It's a terrible thing that happened, but we had to recognize that there is evidence that that in fact took place. The suggestion from Mr. Sarabia that Jamie was strictly just being a person who had no issues and no problems and never did anything violent to Shelby Nealy just doesn't make any sense. Shelby couldn't bear the thought of not being with them. Every horrific act that he did was so that in his mind he could get his kids and keep his kids, because he couldn't bear the thought of being without them. When he kills Jamie, and we're going to talk about why and how to the extent that we can, right? But when he kills Jamie and he leaves and he lives a lie for almost a year and he puts on a facade that everything is okay, he can't talk to anyone about it. He can't tell anyone the horrible thing that he did because he's afraid. Was it the right thing to do? Of course not. Should he have gone to law enforcement, turned himself in? Absolutely. Should he have contacted his mom and dad and said, I did a terrible thing, please, I need help, what do I do? But he didn't. Instead, he lived a lie. That's the trauma that you heard about in this courtroom. That's the trauma that he is suffering during that time period, because he doesn't know what to do. He's a young man. He's a young man who we know from the evidence, and you'll have medical records that you can look at, and I will talk about it here in a little bit. We know that he had traumatic brain injury at some point, potentially several times in his life. So I think it's important that we look at his life. And keep in mind, members of the jury, when you deliberate, when you go back into the deliberation room and talk about this case, you don't put your common sense aside, all right? You bring that with you. The law you will receive from the court, and I'll talk about some of those aspects of the law, but you do not leave common sense behind. So let's talk about Shelby Nealy's life. He's born in August of 1993. You heard from his mother, Lisa, who's sitting here in the courtroom. She was on that witness stand the other day. She told you how she has a difficult time and has sort of pushed away the violence that she experienced when she was 17 and 18 years of age. She broke down briefly. She's stoic, strong, wants to be strong, but broke down briefly while she was recalling that violence. When she was recalling Shelby Nealy's father telling her that she's no good, telling her to crawl through broken glass while there was a gun at her head, and then grabbing Shelby Nealy from her arms, he's 10 months old, and taking him away from her. Mr. Sarabia will say, and you may say, well, he doesn't remember that. Well, we protect our children. Little children can sense when things are wrong. Little children can sense when things are not going as they should. Is it unreasonable that the reason, as his mom told you, that he seemed to have a fear of men until he finally was comfortable with his father, Paul, that may have something to do with Bobby? Absolutely. And Mr. Sarabia said, well, Bobby never did anything to Shelby. Well, there's no evidence that he did anything to Shelby, although we don't know what he may have done when he left that house in a rage and took little Shelby from his mother. We don't know. There's a lot of unknowns. But what we do know is that Lisa Svensson hid out in Texas in 1993, in August of 1993. Her home state, where she had grown up, where she wanted to live. She was in hiding and then had to leave. Leaving the state of Texas, and in her head, in her mind, hearing the words of Bobby, "You're no good, you're never going to amount to anything." Fortunately, she's done well. During the early years, we've heard that Shelby is taken care of by his grandmother in Ohio. Seems to be doing okay. And then things start going sort of in a rough direction. He's not listening. He has ADHD. He didn't get medication right away, but he's having behavior problems. There's no doubt about it. And it's causing problems at home, right? He ends up in relationships that are toxic. Now, Mr. Sarabia wants you to believe that the only reason it's toxic is because the only person who's toxic is Shelby Nealy. I would respectfully suggest to you that's not what the evidence is. That's not what was presented to you, members of the jury. Let's take a look at some of it. And before we do, I want to remind you of one of the instructions that the court, that His Honor will tell you about. Regardless of the result of each juror's individual, remember in jury selection, you all agreed that you would individually reach verdicts. Regardless of the result of each juror's individual weighing process, even if you conclude that the sufficient aggravators outweigh the mitigators, right? So if you conclude that aggravators were there, and I will concede to you, there are sufficient aggravators here that have been proven that makes my client eligible for the death penalty, okay? So the next step after you look at the aggravators, then you look at the mitigators, okay? And you may find that there are many mitigators. You may find that there are few. You may find that they carry some weight. You may find that they carry a lot of weight. But regardless, even if you find that they carry no weight, and I would suggest that there are mitigators that carry weight, but even if you said that they carry no weight, the law neither compels nor requires you to recommend or to reach a verdict that Shelby Nealy should be sentenced to death. The law neither compels nor requires. Remember in jury selection, you will never, ever be required to vote for that. Each and every one of you agreed with that. Each and every one of you agreed that you could come in here today, or for the last 2 weeks, and you would not be an automatic. You knew that there was 3 premeditated murders that had been committed. You knew that Shelby Nealy had pled guilty to 3 murders. And you said, we can do it. We're not automatic. We will listen to everything, and we will make a decision at the end of the deliberations. I'm going to skip this because we're going to talk about the aftermath. There is evidence in this case of mitigation and humanity. Mr. Sarabia questioned, how does it mitigate that Paul Swenson loves Shelby Nealy? How does it mitigate that Shelby Nealy loves his mom and she loves him? How does it mitigate that Maria de Liberato considers him a friend and a fellow human being? It matters because he's a fellow human. He is a life worth saving. And that is a consideration that you as jurors can take into consideration. Is Shelby Nealy someone whose life is worth saving? Would a punishment of life in prison without the possibility of parole potentially be a sufficient penalty in this case? And I would respectfully suggest to you, yes, absolutely it would be. Quite frankly, it might be a more difficult and a harsher sentence than the death penalty. Why? Well, you heard from Bonasco, and he described to you the difference between the two sentences. The privacy that Shelby Nealy's been enjoying for the past 6 years will not exist if he's serving a life sentence. He will be among other inmates. He will be one of 11,000 instead of one of just a few hundred. The notoriety will be gone. He will be a nobody compared to if he's on death row. Those are considerations that you can take into account, because it's okay, it's understandable for a jury to view Shelby Nealy as a monster based on what he did, right? But at the same time, we can also recognize that he's a fellow human being who has purpose, who can do good things for others. And that's why it's important, that's why it's relevant, that's why it's mitigation. I want to go through some of the interviews that took place on January 4th, 2019. Now, Mr. Sarabia would prefer, with all respect to Mr. Sarabia, but he would prefer that anything that Shelby Nealy said on January 4th, 2019, if it helps Mr. Sarabia, my God, give it your seal of approval and accept it all. But if it doesn't fit within his picture of what happened or didn't happen, then it's a lie. I would suggest to you it's not quite that simple. This interview, by the way, and I put the time in, it's 11:53:28 on January 4th, 2019. And Shelby says, "It is tough. I mean, breaks my heart every day, man. They were good people, and they didn't deserve that. And now it's almost as if it was all done for nothing. But I can't believe that. I have to believe that my kids are going to get a happy ending, and that I didn't sacrifice those people for no fucking reason. Because I know it's probably strange, but it hurts. It hurts my heart, I love my wife greatly. I stuck with her through thick and thin, I mean, I got beat every day, man, sometimes with a hammer. There was one time with a shovel. I just stuck with her because I loved her and I loved my kids. And I just wanted her to get better. And of course, there was obviously different and better ways to go about things." I'm going to play this for you so you can hear it from Shelby himself.
Now, it's
Are you able to hear
as
it?
if it was all done for nothing, but I can't believe that. I have to believe that. I have to believe that my kids are going to get a happy ending, and that I didn't sacrifice those people for no fucking reason. Because, no, I know it's probably strange, but it hurts. It hurts my heart. I love my wife greatly. I stuck with her through thick and thin, I mean, I got beat every day, man. Sometimes with a hammer. There was one time with a shovel. And I just stuck with her because I loved her and I loved my kids. And I just wanted her to get better. And of course, there was obviously different and better ways to go about things, but
This is during the same interview where Shelby Nealy has confessed to 3 murders. Not only does he confess to the 3 murders, he also tells law enforcement about another murder that at that point they did not have any information on, was not solved, and he told them all. He told them everything. Is that important? Acceptance of responsibility. That's what that is. Acceptance of responsibility. He tells Detective Anderson, in fact, you may remember at the very beginning, it's like just cut through all the bull and let me tell you what's going on. Could he have easily said, you know, I'm not going to talk to you? Sure. In fact, he was advised. He was told that he has the absolute right to remain silent, but he didn't. He needed to get it off his chest. He needed to let Detective Anderson know what he'd done. And even Detective Anderson recognizes that it probably feels good to have been able to acknowledge what you did and take a step in the right direction. Since you can hear it, I'm not going to read this one. I'm just going to play it for you.
I just want them to have the happy ending. You know, after I killed my wife, I knew somewhere that there wasn't going to be a happy ending for me. But if I could just make a happy ending for them, that's all I cared about. I'm content with going to jail for my crimes and rotting for life, or however long this planet decides to hold up before we blow it up, or you know, whatever the hell happens. I just want my kids okay. I just want them to have a good life.
That recording, by the way, if you want to go back and listen to it later, it's at 11:51:56. This photo is in evidence. It's a photograph of Lisa and Shelby. Lisa is 18 years of age at the time. It's shortly after he was born. And he speaks about his mother. In fact, Detective Anderson starts out by saying, I guarantee your mother is like, there's no way that little boy, because I guarantee you, she still sees you as a certain age. You know, she's in her mind, she pictures my little Shelby. She's not picturing my grown adult Shelby's son. There's no possible way the boy that I raised could have done all this horrific stuff. I guarantee you that. And Shelby says, I didn't want to do this, sir. I promise you in my heart and soul, I didn't want to do this. Why is it important? It's important because it shows remorse.
I guarantee your mother is like, there is no way that little boy, because I guarantee you, she still sees you as a certain age. You know, in her mind, she pictures my little Shelby. She's not picturing my grown adult Shelby's son. There's no possible way the boy that I raised could have done this horrific stuff. I guarantee that's, you know.
I didn't want to do this, sir. I promise you in my heart and my soul, I did not want to do this.
The next segment of the interview is at 03:00:46 on January 4, 2019. And again, it's a conversation between Detective Anderson and Shelby Swenson, and I'm going to let you just listen to it.
Your love of your kids, right? Can't imagine. I have one child. Can't imagine. Can't imagine, you know, what you're going through, what you're, you know, what's going through your mind. I just can't do it.
It just sucks, like laying in that bed, and I used to cuddle with them all the time because, you know, after her, I didn't really like cuddling or sleeping with women, but my kids, oh, man, I loved cuddling with them. Oliver, he just loves just coming over and sitting on my lap.
Makes your day, right?
Yeah.
I used to tell people all the time, I could have the worst day in the world. When I go home and I see my kids, I forget about everything. Is that how you are, kind of?
They definitely helped me out with this year.
Yeah.
And I think somewhere in my head, I always knew I was going to get caught. To be honest with you, I was like, I've always been ready for this moment. That's why I've always told myself, if they catch me, there's no point in lying.
And next to the video, you'll see Shelby on the ground. That photo is also in evidence with his daughter Mackenzie. And the next one, Bella and Oliver. I recognize that there are some photos and evidence that were taken from the scene where the murders took place. And that's terrible and it's sad. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't love his children. Obviously, for this to happen is a terrible thing, and it should not have happened, but it did, and that's why we're here. And that's why Shelby Nealy, by pleading guilty, has forfeited his right to live among us. He has forfeited his right to ever be able to be with his children again. Now, when they become adults, if they choose, if you as a jury allow Shelby Nealy to rot in prison, to die in prison, but they want to, as adults, if they want to go and they want to talk to him, they want to say why, then he could have contact. But that's it, only from behind prison walls. I have another segment. And again, this deals with remorse. And I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to play it. And I'm going to read it because when I read it, it's also part of the record. I just tried to focus on that because this is Shelby Swenson talking, on that because that's who that woman was at the end of the day. You know, she just had a side of her that she couldn't control. And if you're wondering if I hate myself every day for these horrendous acts I committed, it's obvious I do hate myself. I mean, I didn't hate myself. If I didn't hate myself, I wouldn't be here I would be here trying to lie to get myself out of this situation. Detective Anderson says, well, Swenson says, like I am with any other situation, referring to he lies a lot. He recognizes that he lies a lot. Like we discussed before, I mean, you just made some horrible choices. Yes, he did. He made some absolutely horrible, horrific choices. Detective Anderson goes on to say, you know, I mean, and in your mind, I think you built it up to where those were the only choices you could make. He thought he was going to kill his babies. He killed Jamie. And then he lived alive for 10 months. Horrible decision, horrible choices. Detective Anderson goes on to say, that doesn't make you a monster. You know, a monster is when you do something like if you just snuck into their house and killed them for no reason, no remorse. I just did it because I wanted to. I'm going to play that for you.
Trying to focus on that because that's who that woman was at the end of the day. She just had a side of her that she couldn't control. And if you're wondering if I hate myself every day for these horrendous acts I committed, it's obvious I do hate myself. I mean, if I didn't hate myself, I would be sitting here trying to lie to you to get myself out of this situation.
Well,
like I would with any other situation. But
like we discussed before, I mean, you just made some horrible choices. You know, I mean, in your mind, I think you built it up to where those are the only chases you could make. That doesn't make you a monster. You know, a monster is when you do something, like if you just snuck into their house, killed them for absolutely no reason, no remorse, I just did it because I wanted to.
Now, is it possible that Detective Anderson is saying that he has no remorse and he doesn't really mean it? It's possible. But I would suggest to you that it comes across sincere, and I think it's okay for you to evaluate that and say, we believe that when Detective Anderson said that you're remorseful, that he was sincere. Acceptance of responsibility, I mentioned that again, and here's another clip that deals with acceptance of responsibility. This is at 2/16/26 on January 4th, 2019, and this is Detective Anderson's statement. It's much appreciated because in cases like this, everybody has theories of what happened. You know, my theory could be one way, another detective is going to be another way, and the crime scene technician that's there, they're going to have their theories, you know? And you know, when you get first-hand account of the person that did it, you know for a fact what happened. It's not a guess anymore.
It's much appreciated because in cases like this, everybody has theories of what happened. You know, my theory is going to be one way, another detective's is going to be another way, and the crime scene technician that's there, they're going to have their theories, you know? And, you know, when you get first-hand account of the person that did it, you know for fact what happened. It's not a guess anymore.
The next clip is from the second interview recording. It's at 12/13/58 on January 4th. You may recall this. This is where he's on the telephone speaking with his mother. He says, yeah, on you, when I was talking to the detective, he was telling me that they were going to be seeing if you guys are a good, stable home for them, which you know, everything is. All your I's are dotted and all your T's are crossed. I mean, you've been at the house for like 19 years now. So you have had a stable place, stable jobs, you know, everything you guys will be good with. You guys will be good with that. The only thing that sucks is my kids are in CPS right now. And that like really hurts me. Please, when you get my kids, take care of them and love them. And you may recall there is breaks in this where mom is talking and we can't hear what mom says. I know, but I really need you to give it some thought and some serious consideration. So, because these kids need you, Mom. My kids need you so much. That's basically, they tracked me down and got me at the house and then brought me to the police station. Are you there? I'll probably be getting extradited to Florida here soon, within the week. No, Mom, they died. They figured out who did it, and then they caught me. Mom, I know you don't understand, but please don't hang up on me, and please continue loving me. Now, Mr. Sarabian in his closing suggested that that was selfish by Shelby, that all he cared about was himself. I would suggest that it's a genuine desire from someone who knows that, man, has he done a lot of wrong things, particularly during that last year, but a genuine desire on his part to give his children a chance. And that's why he was begging his mom to please take care of my children. I'm going to play that for you.
He was telling me that they're going to be seeing if you guys are a good, stable home for them, which you know, everything is, all your I's are dotted and all your T's are crossed. I mean, you've been at that house for like 19 years now, so you've had a stable place, stable jobs, you know, everything. You guys will be good with that. The only thing that sucks is my kids are in CPS right now, and that like really hurts me. Please, when you get my kids, take care of them and love them. Please. Oh. Well, Mom, would you raise my kids if they gave you my
At
kids?
some point, I must have changed it from my usual one that I showed over and over ago. When the last time it screwed up and they made me change it to the end.
I know. I know. I know, but I really need you to give it some thought and some serious consideration because these kids need you. Granny Debbie is not a good woman when it comes to all that stuff. You are the best mom that I know. You are, and I mean that with my whole heart. My kids need you, Mom. My kids need you so much. You're... Basically, they tracked me down and got me at the house and then brought me to the police station. I'll probably, are you there? I'll probably be getting expedited to Florida here soon, within this week.
Yeah, you were supposed to assault them and call them.
No, Mom. They died, and they figured out who did it, and then they caught me.
Yeah. This morning, they're going to be gone for the day before long. Well, it's on Friday, when you first got there, sitting on a map that, well, I just...
I know you don't understand, but
I'm pretty good.
Please don't hang up on me, and please continue loving me.
Mr. Sarabia made a comment in his closing argument about the delays between the arrest and when Shelby Nealy entered guilty plea to the manslaughter, guilty plea to the 3 first-degree murder charges that he's here before you for sentencing. He talked about the delay, and there's no evidence that's been presented to you about the delay, and you shouldn't speculate on that. Lawyers take a lot of time to do a lot of stuff, as you know. I mean, nothing moves fast in this setting, and so if you want to point the finger at anyone, you point the finger at me, you point the finger at his lawyers, but you don't point the finger at Shelby Nealy. Shelby Nealy, from day one, admitted his involvement. And then on December 13th, I believe it was, 2023, he pled guilty. He pled guilty to the manslaughter charge. And he pled guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder without a guarantee, without a promise of what the sentence would be. He certainly could have exercised his right to a trial. He could have required the state of Florida to prove the case against him beyond a reasonable doubt. He could have enjoyed the burden of proof that jurors would be advised about, that is, that they had to prove everything beyond a reasonable doubt, and that he has to be presumed innocent. But he did not. He accepted responsibility, and to the extent that he could, tried to assist in providing some sort of closure. Dr. Heather Holmes testified, as did several other experts in this case. And Dr. Heather Holmes sort of gave you a sort of a big picture of Shelby Nealy's life. She indicated that he was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, that he had dependent personality disorder, and that he's been taking Lexapro, which is a antidepressant medication, for years. Now, there are other records that corroborate, and they're in evidence, that corroborate Dr. Holmes's diagnosis. The suggestion is made by the state of Florida that because these experts are being paid, that you should disregard their testimony. That's not something you should do. You heard that each and every one of them were authorized by the courts, paid at rates that are customary. And so the suggestion that just because they're being paid, like everyone else is being paid that's in here, jurors don't really get enough pay, but everyone else is getting paid. The bottom line is, they could have called their own experts if they wanted to. They chose not to. One of the things that Dr. Holmes talks about is how he's constantly getting himself in these toxic relationships and how he has difficulties with his emotions and with working things out and behaving appropriately when faced with challenges, emotional challenges and what have you. You heard from Dr. James Campbell. He is a trauma expert. Now, you recalled Dr. Holmes, and the state is correct. When Dr. Holmes evaluated Shelby Nealy, Dr. Holmes did not find PTSD. Okay? But that's not her primary area of expertise. Her primary area of expertise, or one of her areas of expertise, deals with sexual abuse type cases. And so she's the one that initially talks to Shelby Nealy about the sexual abuse. Dr. Campbell comes in, and he's talking primarily about trauma. And he talks about the sexual abuse by the stepmother. Mr. Sarabia, I apologize if I misheard it. You rely on your notes. You rely on your memory. But I think he made some reference to porno fantasy in his closing. At the very least, making light of the idea that it's not really sexual abuse because Shelby Nealy probably enjoyed it. That was the implication. That was the suggestion. Sort of a Mrs. Robinson type of a scenario. But what do we know from the experts? He may have, the physical act itself, he may not have viewed himself as a victim, right? But there is a reason we have laws. There's a reason that doctors consider it abuse when there is such a big age discrepancy between an adult and a minor. And the reason is that when you're young, you can't handle the emotional aspect of it as well. That's one of the reasons. And I would suggest to you that if I ever went to Mr. Sarabia with that type of a case, where my client is charged with having sexual activity or sexual conduct with a minor,
I would object.
he would kick me out of his office. He would kick me out of his office if I came with that proposal on that type of a case. It is correct that we primarily rely on the statements of Shelby Nealy to prove that sexual abuse took place. It's correct that the perpetrator didn't come and testify, I abused my stepson. Didn't come and say I had consensual sexual intercourse with my stepson. That's correct. So what do we have other than Shelby Nealy's statement that corroborates the idea that, you know what, maybe it did happen? I would suggest to you there are several things from the record that supports the idea that it happened. The primary thing is how he reacted when his father shot and killed himself the day after his 17th birthday. Now, he didn't tell anyone about it. He didn't check it off on the form. But both, I believe Dr. Holmes and Dr. Campbell said that's normal. People generally don't like to talk about those type of things. He may not even recognize that that was a thing at the time. It was consensual. But as a society, we recognize, as doctors, they recognize that that's not something that we approve on because it is damaging, it hurts. It has the potential of really hurting young teenagers and children. Another piece of evidence that I would respectfully suggest to you supports the idea that it in fact happened is that he didn't want his mom to know. He didn't want his mom to feel bad about the fact that he went to Texas because mom was worried about him going to Texas. Mom was worried, and she was assured by the stepmother that everything is okay now. It's okay now. And that, she trusted that. But Shelby Nealy didn't want her to know. He didn't want her to feel any worse than what she already did about what's happened and where she is. The suggestion again and again and again in the closing argument of Mr. Sarabia was that Jamie Ivancic never did anything wrong. It was all Shelby Nealy. Recall the testimony of retired Deputy Fox from Palm Beach. Now, granted, she didn't really remember a lot of details, but I asked her, when you prepare a report, do you put down details in case you ever have to come to court and testify? She said yes. Do you make sure it's accurate? Yes. She said Jamie Ivancic appeared completely out of control when she arrived. She was sitting on the ground, very uncooperative, and it was said that she had said she was going to kill herself and her unborn baby. And she was Baker acted. Baker acted meaning involuntarily hospitalized. Law enforcement doesn't just do that unless there is a reason for it. Dr. Woe is a neuropsychologist who came here and testified before you. Now, quite frankly, I don't know that I really understand everything that he said. Quite frankly, I don't. But what we do know is that that's his area of expertise, right? That he's gone to school, he testified, he's been recognized as an expert throughout the country in courts, and he said that the standardized testing that he did, the intelligence testing and the memory testing, while a lot of it was within the normal range, there were discrepancies. Discrepancies that means that from his perspective, as a neuropsychologist, he believes there's a red flag that there's evidence of traumatic brain injury. Okay? On the right side. in the same area where you have trouble, the same troubles that the Dr. Holmes talked about, right? Do we disregard his testimony because he was paid? No. The state of Florida had every opportunity to call their own witness, their own expert, if they believed that his testimony was inaccurate or faulty. There's also medical history that corroborates Dr. Woe. There is medical records from the Metro Health Center in Cleveland, Ohio, that corroborates the head injury, where it is suggested in the records, and you'll be able to look at those records, that a CAT scan was done, that there was intracranial bleeding, that neurosurgery was recommended to be held and for him to be held and observed, and that he signed out against medical advice. Poor judgment, right? He should have stayed. He should have made sure that he got the proper treatment. But that doesn't change the fact that there's evidence of traumatic brain injury. When you look at the Metro Health pages, look at pages 157 through 162. This is for the December 16, 2012 visit, and you'll see those records. Another record that corroborates Dr. Woe's testimony is from St. Vincent Hospital from October 8, 2016. Again, not only does it corroborate head trauma, but it also corroborates the diagnosis of Dr. Holmes that he suffers from a major depressive disorder. All of this is important because it gives us some insight into why he's making such poor choices. And that it's not all just sitting down and thinking about it and this is what I'm going to do. Whoops. Again, the expert fees, the witness fees, paid for by the state of Florida with court approval, and the prosecution could have called their own experts and chose not to. Why? Maria de Liberato, assistant public defender, used to represent Shelby Nealy, executive director of Floridians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, friend and considers him family. Some of the nuggets from her testimony was she's never had a case where the kids did not reach out for answers when they became adults. And Shelby Nealy is more than the worst thing he's ever done. He writes letters and cards for his two youngest children, Bella and Oliver, because he's not allowed to have contact with them. But he writes them and asks Maria, please hold the letters for me, please hold the cards for me, so that if they ever reach out, if they ever want some information from me, you have it and you can share it with them. The prosecution, in their effort to challenge this witness, talks about the fact that he's against the death penalty. It doesn't mean that he's going to come in here and lie. Suggested that she has some tattoo on her neck that she doesn't have. Is that the best they could do? Grace Hannah. The suggestion was made that it's, she's getting paid and that's why she's doing this work, but the reality is that she was volunteering her time to type up the manuscript of the book. The book that she, quite frankly, doesn't think is that good. Certainly not her type of book. Just like Lisa, Shelby's mom, not her type of book. But nevertheless, she decided to volunteer her time for about a year in 2024 to help him type up a manuscript of a book that he had wanted to publish, self-publish. She indicated that she volunteers for the Floridians for alternatives to the death penalty because she herself had a family who was a victim of a brutal murder. And because she recognizes the humanity of her fellow humans. Raul Bonasco, 39 years working in corrections, recognized as an expert in state and federal courts throughout the state of Florida and the United States. Now, he told you about the difference between general population and death row. We think it's important for you to know, to have an idea of what exactly is it that you're being asked to do. What exactly will happen depending on what you do. And that was the purpose of his testimony, to give you some insight into what life is like in general population versus death row. He told you that when you are in general population, you're working a 60-hour work week. You probably start out pushing a lawnmower in 100-degree weather. You have no privacy. You're looking over your shoulder because you're not alone. There are 11,000 plus inmates in the Florida Department of Corrections serving life sentences. They're anonymous. They're nobody. You have to share access to the television. Your meals are had in the chow hall. And while you have to work, you have no access to tools that can be used as weapons. Makes sense. What did he tell you about death row? He said it's the bed and breakfast of the Department of Correction. You have your own private room, private sink and toilet. Not allowed and not required to work. You're allowed contact visits. You have access to your own tablet, like an iPad type of thing, and your own television 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you're part of a very small number of people, 267 individuals. He told you that regardless of whether or not you are in general population, on a life sentence without parole, or on death row, you will die in prison. You may recall that there were some questions about some hypothetical scenario where maybe that would not happen. Do not be fooled by that. His Honor will advise you that a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole is exactly that. Shelby Nealy would die in prison. The difference is, if he's in general population, he doesn't have a private room. He has to work. Now, Mr. Sarabia, I can't remember if it was Mr. Sarabia or Mr. Doig, but questioned Bonasco about, well, that doesn't really benefit anyone that they're working. Well, yeah, it does, because it saves on taxpayer funds. The image in this slide is the alternative sentence, the gurney, because you heard about from Mr. Bonasco that if you're sentenced to death, when you arrive on death row, And you don't go through the regular process and you go straight to death row. When you arrive on death row, they give you an option. The default option is, at some point, you are executed via lethal injection. But they also give you the option where you can choose, one time, to be executed in Old Sparky or the electric chair instead. When you go back to deliberate, I want you to take your time. I know it's 3:45 on a Friday afternoon. We talked about that in jury selection, about we're not going to rush it. It's your time. It's your decision how much time you take. But you should fully deliberate and discuss the evidence and the verdict. While the verdict ultimately is an individual verdict, it's important that you discuss it, that you recognize and respect that everyone can have different opinions on the matter. And keep in mind, if 7 jurors vote for death and 5 jurors vote for life, that's a life sentence. In order for a death sentence to be imposed, it requires 8 jurors. One of the instructions that the court will read you you'll get this. You'll get this to take back with you. You'll be able to look at it, read it again and again. But one of the things that's in there is a statement that before you vote, you should carefully consider and weigh the evidence, realizing that a human life is at stake, and bring the best judgment to bear in reaching your decision. You heard from Lisa Svensson yesterday on the witness stand. You saw her. You saw the heartbreak that she is experiencing. And I would just tell you again, respectfully, that her love for her son, his love for his mother, matters. It matters. And I'm not going to ask you for mercy for Shelby Nealy. You know, mercy, I would suggest, is bestowed and it's not earned. And certainly, his mother has done nothing wrong. But I'm going to ask you to bestow mercy in sentencing Shelby Nealy to life in prison without possibility of parole for his mother.
Objection.
You heard from Paul Svensson yesterday. He was on that witness stand. He struggled a little bit. I would suggest to you he struggled because he loves Shelby Nealy, despite what he's done. He agrees. He agrees that Shelby Nealy should never, ever walk out of prison doors, and nor will he ever walk out of a prison door. In fact, when we're done here today, he will never wear a sweater and a nice shirt like that again. He'll be ushered to the Florida Department of Correction, where he'll be issued a uniform, whether he's on death row or serving life in prison. The fact that Paul Svensson, who remembers when he first met Shelby, it was his 3rd date, I believe, with his wife. And he didn't have any toys. I mean, he was single. He had just gotten out of the Marine Corps, and so he bought a bunch of toys. And Shelby really liked the Tonka truck. And that's a memory that Paul will always treasure. But for Paul, I ask that you consider mercy. Shelby Nealy will die in prison. A verdict of life in prison without parole is a just verdict. Consider mercy. The instruction that deals with mercy is the instruction that basically says, even if you get to that final point, even if you get to that point where you have decided that the aggravators outweigh the mitigators, right? Even if you find that there were no mitigators, right? When you get to that point, you then make an individual decision. Is this the case? Is this the case that calls for the death penalty? And I would respectfully suggest to you, it is not. It is not. And I ask for mercy, not for Shelby, but for Bella and Oliver, for Mackenzie, for Lisa and Paul, and for many others who value Shelby as a fellow human being. He can help others, and he should be allowed to die of natural causes and sit and think about what he did for the rest of his life. Thank you.
Thank you.